Hello and welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, John Stancorp. Today's hang is with Rick Vito. Rick is a slide guitar virtuoso whose soulful melodies have graced stages alongside music legends. With his mastery of slide guitar, Rick has etched his name alongside icons like Bob Seger, Fleetwood Mac, and John Mayall. We delve into Rick's remarkable journey and his passion for slide guitar. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell for notifications. And now, let's hang with Rick Vito.
Outside, I'm in Franklin, Tennessee.
That's a beautiful area.
Have you been there?
Yeah. When I would go to do some projects there and stuff, I had a friend that I used to stay in Franklin, and he had a little Airbnb place, so I kind of had it to myself. Really super nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it here.
Yeah.
I always wanted to live in the country.
Yeah. I think Phil Kagi and like Larry Carlton and some other folks might be your neighbors.
Well, Larry used to live right down the street, but I don't know where he is now. I haven't seen him in years. Phil, I haven't met, although I like his playing.
Yeah. Well, I'll try not to ask a lot of the typical questions, and it can go anywhere you'd like. But one thing I got a real treat this morning is I haven't been able to see the entire Peter Green Memorial Concert, but I got to see your performance on Oh Well, and that was just a real fun way to start my morning. So that might be an interesting jumping off point to talk about your recollections and participation and what Peter meant to you. And
Right. Okay. Well, I guess I'll start from the beginning on that. Yeah, he did mean a lot to me because I got to see the original band in Philadelphia in, I think, late '68. And I'd seen everybody at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia, Hendrix and Cream, and 10 years after, and Jeff Beck, and, it just went on and on. So everybody, because I wanted to hear everybody and how they sounded live. And so Hendrix, of course, was the biggest mind blower because he was so great. And I think you really had to see him live to appreciate how broad his talent was. It wasn't just like this crazy guy getting up there and smashing his guitars. I mean, this guy was really advanced and original. But after that, I have to say that Peter Green, for me personally, gave me the greatest sense of direction, because I loved the way he was so tasty. He said a lot with less than most guitar players, and his tone was impeccable, as everybody knows, and his singing was great, just really phenomenal, and his songs were cool. Yeah. I thought, well, that's everything I want to be in one guy. So I want to take the direction. Of course, there was other players that I loved too. Jesse Davis, Amos Garrett. There was just B.B. King, all the Kings. There's a lot of them. But for that time period, he made a strong impression on me. And of course, oddly enough, 20-some years later, I was asked to join Fleetwood Mac. And one of the things that Mick and I had in common was a love for that early stuff. That's what influenced me. I wasn't influenced by the 70s stuff at all. And so we were able to bring back some of that old music. And then later on, Mick and I started the Mick Fleetwood Blues Band. Yeah. And that combined my original songs with some of the, the early stuff, the Peter Green era music. And he'd been talking about doing this tribute concert in London for Peter for years. And it kind of fell off the radar for a while. And then we got out of touch. We stopped playing for one reason or another. And he went off in one direction, I went off in another. And I got a call from him on Christmas Day, like 2 months before this concert was supposed to happen. And he said, look, I've been rehearsing with these guys, and nobody knows the stuff like you do. And he said, would you can we talk about what we need to talk about and make this happen? And of course, I said, yeah, because I wanted to be a part of that.
All
And
right.
I did know the music. And so I went out to Maui where we rehearsed, and it came together pretty quickly. And we had some great players, and of course, everybody loved Peter Green. I don't think they knew the music as well as I did because I'd been playing it professionally for years and years. So it was a great thrill to play with Billy Gibbons and Jeremy Spencer and Christine McVie. It was her last performance. Pete Townsend and David Gilmour. I mean, great players, and everybody totally respected Peter. And although Peter didn't come to the show, which we were sad about, I did hear that he got to see it before he passed away several months after.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a just a beautiful tribute to him because you could tell there's such a genuine love and appreciation for him as a player. And
Yes.
yeah, it's a very fitting and very beautiful tribute for such a amazing player that I guess BB King had said he was the only player of the British group of blues guitarists that ever made him be a little nervous, like, who is this?
Gave him cold sweat. Yeah, there's that famous quote.
Right.
Yeah, well, he gave a lot of people inspiration, but nobody had that tone. I mean, other people had used it for out of phase tone, like James Burton on early Rick Nelson records, but it was a different Fendery sound. Whereas, this accident that happened with his guitar produced this amazing tone, and he really made incredible use of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Albatross comes to mind as a song that is not not necessarily in the it's just such a lyrical, beautiful way of playing it. And I think that's my favorite thing is when guys that are steeped in blues will just that are but are very attracted to melody, like yourself, Jeff Beck, David Gilmour, Peter Green. The melody is really the key, and I guess it a lot of those guys were also, maybe yourself, were influenced by Hank Marvin. The really
I love Hank Marvin. I play Apache almost every time I sit down to practice. I'll start off and I get to the part where you go, the horse is galloping. Try to do that with precision every single time, like Hank Marvin does it, and I guarantee you will flub. And yeah, I got to meet Hank, and I love Hank, and of course Dwayne Eddy, and those pioneers, Chuck Berry's, all very important guys.
yeah. How Hank and Bruce and those guys could do all those steps and make it look and smile, look great, and the red strat and everything. It was just a very intoxicating thing for a young. I mean, I that was prior to my time, but all of my hero, everyone across the board, including yourself now, my guitar heroes are cite Hank as the guy. Yeah.
Well, he wasn't the guy when I was growing up because we didn't get the Shadows over here in the States at the time. Uh, Apache was a hit by Jorgen Ingman, who was a Danish guy. And all the other stuff that was cool that they did was covered by the Ventures.
Right.
So I started hearing about Hank after the Beatles, but didn't really get into his music until much later.
Yeah.
But Mick was and we went to see him in Australia, and Mick was in tears. Just yeah, he was so influenced by the Shadows. We went backstage and hung out with them. Great guys. Just totally inspirational.
Very down to earth. The
Oh yeah.
the period of time that is very exciting to me is the early to mid 70s, and the amazing players that you would find on recordings that were also touring, that in the studio they were brought in, like yourself, Jesse Ed Davis, David Lindley. They were called in to bring their thing, their style, their influence, uh, je ne sais quoi. They're the thing that made them special. And
Yeah.
I love that idea of being sought after as a sideman to be able to bring your thing to whether Todd Rundgren calling you in on his album or Jesse Ed Davis on Jackson Brown's Doctor My Eyes, any of the bringing in players that served the song that gave of themselves as opposed to a studio guy that's just reading parts and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd be interested to
Well,
your early days of session work, touring.
yeah, I thought about all this that you've just commented on. And I think the interesting thing for me uh, when I went out to Los Angeles was when I did get to do session work, it really wasn't, you weren't made to feel like a sideman.
Right.
You were made more to feel like you were joining a band. I mean, yeah, it was Jackson Brown, or it was Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, or it was, whatever, Bonnie Raitt and all. But, no one made you feel like you were being called in as a sideman. That S word was never used.
Right.
And so that's what made it artistically interesting for me. And I must say that all the people that I work with, I'm still friendly with, and I'm very proud of all that work because it was very creative. Number one, it was creative more so than just punching in, the clock and doing your thing. A lot of the guys that did play on sessions like Lindley and Jesse Davis, they did do a fair amount of sessions. So they were sort of a little bit of a session guy, a little bit of a band member, a little bit of a touring guy, and a little bit of a solo artist. And I guess that's kind of where I fell into in the same way.
Yeah. And the guys that were able to bring in the lyrical thing through slide guitar work or just other interesting shades and colors. It seems like the breadth of what players were able to do at that point was outstanding. Just because you guys really knew how to serve the song and elevate it to a new place.
Well, I think the best of all these players, and what I've always strived to do, was to try to develop something. Nobody's completely original, but wherever you can, dial up that original thing and add it to the song, which really makes the song work, really fits in with the song and elevates the song. That's when you really feel that you've been successful at what you're trying to pull off, and that's the mark of a good player, I think. Not necessarily speed or what you've learned at the Guitar Institute of Technology or anything like that. If you put the time in and that old expression of paying your dues, putting the time in, putting your road work in, putting your studying in and practicing, blah, blah, blah. That all comes together at some point, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, to be able to, and the other thing is, it would remind you when you're a kid and you're listening to these recordings, maybe a teenager, but to listen to the Byrds and to be a fan of the Byrds and then work later with Roger McGuinn and that sort of thing would be I don't know if the Byrds were a seminal influence on you coming up.
They weren't actually. The whole reason I started working with Roger was I had left this other group that I was working with in Los Angeles. It was a band trying to get a record deal and such. And we put a couple of years into it, and didn't click. So a friend of mine called me and asked me if I'd just come down and jam with Roger. Well, during that time of the early to mid 70s, I was trying to expand my playing just beyond blues and rock and roll. And I got this little device that a guy named Richard Bowden made for me, and it would bend your E string. Well, that's what Clarence White was doing. So although I never really listened to the Byrds or Clarence White, I was a little bit fluent in this style. So we went to jam with Roger. He said, "Well, what you're doing fits in with my music perfectly." He said, "Let's do a record, Thunderbird, and see where that goes." And so we did the record. Record came out pretty good, and then we toured for a year, and actually got real popular in Europe. But his record company didn't recognize that. That band should have gone on a little longer. And I enjoyed working with Roger, although I stepped outside myself to play that kind of music.
Right. Do you still?
Stretch.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you still play like B or G bender guitars at all, or do they ever find their way back
I have
to tunes?
I try I try to use them on certain things, but I try to make them sound anything but country. That's the challenge.
Right.
So I use it a little bit in my slide playing, and just want a different flavor. It does. I don't overuse it.
Right. As far as the slide influences, I would guess the obvious Elmore James, but any slide influence that would maybe be off the beaten path that not a lot of people would know, that would maybe be worth seeking out if anybody hasn't heard of that particular musician.
Well, for me, the first slide I heard without knowing it was slide really was Brian Jones on the Little Red Rooster and Rolling Stones and whatever. All that early slide work. I thought it was Keith Richards, and I thought he was just using a Bigsby or something. I didn't know what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And then later, Jesse Ed Davis for sure, big influence. And then I started seeking out the Elmore James records and Earl Hooker and Robert Nighthawk, blues guys. And, anybody that came along that played really nice slide, I would always listen to and see what made them tick and such. And I thought Mick Taylor was a great rock and roll slide guitar player, blues player. And, so anybody who came along, which is pretty much, what I listen for, is just something unique that inspires you a little bit to not copy them, but be influenced or inspired by them rather.
Right. Yeah. Having it be inspired and having it come out in your own vernacular in ways that you wouldn't necessarily be able to put your finger on and say, well, that's a specific lick, but the inspiration and the
yeah. And I think some of those early blues guys, the Tampa Red had a beautiful vibrato to his playing, and you can hear a direct line, like say from Tampa Red to Robert Nighthawk to Earl Hooker to Mick Taylor. You can hear that, once you start really listening to the licks and how they apply them.
Yeah. Are your instruments set up are they typically high action, thick strings, or is there something that you do for your guitars?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. High action, thick strings, heavy slide. Trying to find that you try to find that right spot where you can still play rhythm on the lower end of the strings, and be high enough off the frets that you get a nice pure tone, like a steel guitar gets a pure tone because it's not fretting out at all. So I don't like that sound that you get if your action's too low, and it makes unfriendly sounds.
And obviously muting, or maybe not obviously, but muting behind the slide itself, and then also with your picking hand.
Some guys can do that muting behind the slide. I can't do that. I do it all with this part of my hand, and this part of my hand, and then just try to concentrate on the string. If you're playing that on an E string or B string, and you can kind of hold the other strings with your other fingers so that they don't get in the way of that melody.
Yeah. When I first discovered your playing, it was probably 20 years ago, but I was struck by your sense of style and your passion for Art Deco.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I just thought, man, this guy kind of harkens back to an era of the blues guys that would always be on stage just dressed really well with a sharp, well done suit, and just looking great. And plus the guitars that you play, I was like, man, this guy really. I think it may have been I was aware of you, but I think I'd seen you with Billy Burnett and when the Fleetwood Mac thing was happening
Yeah.
early.
Hmm.
Man, this guy has a lot of style and panache.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I, I I like design. I design guitars and co-design guitars with Reverend Guitars Company, and actually have one of the earlier designs right here. You brought up the Art Deco thing, and I really love those old National and Supro
Yeah.
lap steel guitars and like the some of the early electric guitars. So I kind of brought a little of that
Yep.
Deco styling. There's a Deco headstock, and the streamlines of the body of the guitar and
Yeah,
back there.
that guitar is on
So
my bucket.
definitely Art Deco influence there.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list guitar because it's got the either a P90 or P100, the humbucker, the look, the aesthetic. It really that Joe Naylor at Reverend Guitars and also the guy at Duesenberg just make really nice stuff. Really beautiful pieces of art.
Well, yeah, we tried to. I think my the first guitar that I designed totally on my own was in. I was started playing it around 87 or so, and it had that center section with the streamlines on. I started seeing other companies do that also. I'm not taking total credit for it, but um, this particular guitar that I just showed you does have a P90 in the neck, and then we tried to get the sound of the old lap steels, which were single coils. So it looks like a humbucker in the bridge, but it is in fact a single coil and
Yeah,
has a little bit of steely sound,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
if you use.
yeah. It's a really beautiful instrument. Sounds great. I
Yeah.
think I heard you play it for or it may not have been that guitar, but a guitar similar to that. I had your instructional DVD, and I think
Oh,
you're performing on a Reverend guitar of some kind, but it had some of the same appointments.
if it was it a more recent.
Yeah, it was probably maybe the mid 2000s, 2007, 2008, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah, that because I did a couple of them, but one of them was when I used one of the earlier Reverend guitars when they were made with the sort of masonite kind of bodies,
Okay.
and the more recent one I did using this actual guitar that I just showed you.
Oh, nice.
Guitar
Do
place.
you play much in the way of lap steel? I've got a 56 Fender lap steel here.
As long as I don't have to play it on my lap, I can play it like this,
I
but
can't do.
I can't play with a slide like this. I can only go like this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have no control over this. And vibrato is the thing. And nah, it never worked for me. Can't play piano and I can't play lap steel the way it's supposed to be played.
Right. Yeah, the it's interesting to I got this about 17 years ago, and it was a guy's music store that was just unloved. It was in this little tweed case. It was beat to death. I had never seen one before, but as soon as I opened it, it reminded me of David Gilmour's lap steel. And I come to find out that it might be around that same period of time. And um, this thing inspired me to 15 years ago put together a Pink Floyd tribute group, and we're touring all over now and having great success. But this is the thing that launched my desire to do a Pink Floyd show, and it's been I don't know what I was thinking because here we are 15 years later, and there's 14 people, 8 musicians, and 6 crew people, and going out and doing the
What do
big
you call your band there? What do you call
signs,
it?
signs of life, the American Pink Floyd.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. No, Ken Haas, who is the actual owner of Reverend Guitars now,
Yeah.
he's had a band for years and he plays lap steel like yours.
Oh, nice.
And they've got a kind of a takeoff on Pink Floyd called Polka Floyd.
That's great.
So they do like Pink Floyd songs, but with a little more of a
Yeah,
Midwest polka flavor.
little boom chick kind of thing. Yeah, growing
A
up
little bit, yeah.
growing up in Cincinnati and being a very German, town with the
That's where you grew up in Cincinnati?
that's where I'm from. Yeah.
Were you aware of Big Ed Thompson and the All
Oh,
Stars?
absolutely. Big Ed. Yep. Yeah, he's
Amazing.
legendary. Yeah. Big Ed Thompson and H. Bomb Ferguson and
H. Bomb Ferguson. Lonnie Mack was from there, I think, too.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, he's hometown hero. Adrian Belew was right over the bridge into Kentucky and northern Kentucky.
Yeah.
Another kind of and Bootsy Collins. So and actually, I
Okay.
the Isley brothers had a connection to part of Cincinnati with King Records, and James Brown was
All
there.
right.
So we have a few.
King.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have a good legacy there.
yeah. My wife and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina now. But yeah, there's a lot of growing up. That was the first thing that I heard as a kid going to the skating rink was the R&B funk music.
Oh, yeah,
Ohio Players,
absolutely.
Bootsy, Parliament Funkadelic, all that kind of stuff. So, and then it wasn't until later that I realized kind of the lineage of things. And I was talking to Jazz Obrecht of Guitar Player Magazine as a kid.
Yes, yeah.
I got into Ernie Isley and I absolutely adored him. And then I heard Hendrix later. And I was like, God, that guy's ripping off Ernie Isley. I didn't realize I had it completely backwards.
That's why it took me a while to get into Stevie Ray Vaughan because as a player and someone who's listened to and seen both Hendrix and Albert King, which arguably was his two biggest influences. I didn't get it. It was like, well, it's like the original guys are the guys who. But when I went to see him a couple of years after that, and I saw his energy and everything, what he was doing with it, I understood it more completely.
Yeah. The the thing that's uh, on my mind as we talk about the legacy of guitars and that kind of thing, that the danger that you run with getting too involved in hyperbole is that it sounds like it's false praise. But I will say that for me, in the history of recorded music, without sounding like teenage hyperbole, the best guitar solo I think I've ever heard has got to be Like a Rock.
Wow.
I think the emotional impact of that solo is, and there, it's hard to put into words, but it captured uh, something just magical. I would guess that everybody asks you about that, and why would they not? Because it's very iconic, and it's a little sad that it was associated with a car thing, but if it turns anybody onto that and in turn turns them onto you and they be able to go and find out your discography, that's a beautiful thing. But that solo is just I tell all my friends and they're like, yeah, I have to go back and listen to it. And they go back and listen to it and they're, yep, you're right. That is just and and I get
Wow.
if there was a movie made of that, you would like to think that was a first take thing and but for Bob Seger to say it's the best recorded solo that he's ever heard.
Yeah, he did had to say something to that effect on his greatest hits record. Yeah, it just I had been doing a lot of work. I had just come out of Jackson Brown's thing, and I was playing a lot of slide and recording my own records and stuff at that point, and playing that Dumble amp with the Les Paul TV Junior guitar I had, and so they called me up to do that session, and I heard this track, and I said, "Geez, I'd really like to try a slide guitar on that." And Bob said, "Oh, no, I don't really want slide guitar. Because I guess he was figuring, stock slide guitar on more James licks or something. I don't know what he was thinking. I said, "Give me one pass." and we got that whole thing on the first pass. It was a combination of the sound and the inspiration and the song and just I don't know, some spiritual thing took place, and I'm very surprised that it touched as many people as it has. And I guess the commercial did help. The Chevy commercial did help get it across to a lot of people. Everybody remembers that commercial. How could you not? Ran for over 10 years.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I'm very proud of it. I've only done a few things probably that are on that level.
right. I've I've showed that to so many guitar students because I've been teaching for about 35 years, and I tell my students, if you have an opportunity to try to tell a story in a solo, and it's a finite chunk of time, which is in some ways very difficult, the way that Rick comes into that solo, he has you at hello. The entrance point to that solo, and everything that was played was as a response to where you just were. So it absolutely tells the story of the song. And again, I'm smacking of hyperbole, but I really believe that it's the perfect solo because it states everything that you need to know. If you just soloed the track, you'd go, man, I think I enjoy that as a piece of music, like a well crafted.
Yeah, it's a shame that they don't give you songwriter credit for the amount of space that you take up in a 4-minute record. I certainly would have been a co-writer.
Yeah, and
It was so much of it there.
yeah, the outro, and you get two solos too which is another
Yeah,
thing that's a real
yeah.
treat to hear the outro.
And we tried to take other takes of it, and it couldn't match the first one.
Yeah,
So it's a note for all you engineers out there: hit that red button right from the start. Don't lose it.
yeah. There's some other solos that are in the ballpark like that. David Lindley's solo on "Running on Empty"
Classic,
is very
classic.
like that too. And it's interesting that more people don't get involved in slide because I believe it's the closest thing that we can get to being a vocalist, which at the end of the day, if we get anywhere near the emotive quality of the vocals, then we're doing something worthy.
Oh, that's exactly what I love about playing the slide is that you can soar from one note to another without changing your fret position, I mean, with your fingers. It's that slide just as a voice would do. A voice doesn't like clip, clip, clip from note to note. It it sort of has no uh, definition between notes. It does have definition, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what the slide enables you to do, a lyrical voice-like quality.
Yeah, if you can, and it allows you to get close to it would what it might have been like to be somebody like Aretha Franklin, that kind of emotive quality where it's about how you're getting into the note, when to apply the vibrato, how much, and all the little trails and things like it. It's a very thumbprint kind of thing. Everybody has their unique take on it. But my favorite players like yourself, Greg Koch, Derek Trucks, uh,
Great players.
just, but everybody's uniquely, it, when you guys are soaring, it's like hearing a really great singer. So that's to me, or Jeff Beck with the things that he did with slide that were a bit unorthodox that I'd never seen anybody do, where he would play melodies fretting over the pickup, holding the slide in his right hand. I'd never seen anybody do that.
Right. I don't know how he did it. He was a genius. Amazing.
Yeah. So
I
it's
think I've come to appreciate him more now after he's gone, going back and looking at a lot of his live performances were just, he was totally in a class by himself.
Yeah. Yeah. The things that he could do with harmonics and the bar and that sort of thing. Are there any projects that you're?
I mean, certainly developed a incredibly unique personal style for sure. I'm just adjusting this because I'm losing my battery. Sorry.
Oh, no
I think
worries.
I'm still good. All right. You with me?
Yep, I got you.
Okay. There we are. I'm gonna have to hold it because with this uh, cord plugged in, it's no big deal. I got it.
Got it. Are there any projects that are on the horizon for you that excited about?
Yeah, I got a new guitar that just came out. I have it here. I'll see. I can show you a little bit of it. This is the new Rick Vito signature model. It's called Soul Agent. You can see where it's a little bit
Huh?
like the first guitar, but this is more of a Fender scale neck. It's a bolt-on, same kind of P90 and humbucker, and they've got some really cool features with push and pull knobs on it that allow you to get like a single coil sound without being single coil. So you're still in humbucking mode on the humbucking pickup. And also the tone knob gives you an out of phase sound, which of course I like.
Oh yeah.
And I use so we've got that. And then I just signed with a label called Blue Heart Records. I finished the record. I just turned it into them yesterday, so it's coming out March 22nd. It's called Cadillac Man.
Oh,
And
nice.
I really like this record, man. It really came out good.
Yeah. So who did you have on the record with yourself?
Well, myself, but I had Lynn Williams is a great drummer. He used to be with Delbert McClinton and Kevin McKendry, also another Delbert guy on B3, and then Rick Reed, my old road drummer, Charlie Harrison, my old bass player. Let's see who else. Oh, Jim Hoke, fabulous saxophonist, and he's been on all my solo records.
Oh, nice.
I play bass, so I play upright and electric bass, so and all the guitars, of course.
Nice. Now, will you be out supporting the record and doing some shows or?
I do have one engagement booked. It's the Berks County Jazz Fest in Reading, Pennsylvania on April 13th, and then the Living Room on April 14th in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. We're looking to get a date in Bethlehem on the 12th. And so I think now that news of the record gets out and stuff, but I haven't toured like since COVID. You know that gig we talked about earlier um, in London, the Peter Green tribute, was the last big gig I did. Otherwise, I've just played locally at a few local clubs. I
Yeah.
haven't done anything.
Yeah.
Maybe that 2024.
Yeah. And you were kind of the part of the house band for the Peter Green Memorial, and then special guests would come on and perform.
They call a core band. Although I got to, I got to do a lot of vocals and take the lead on a lot of songs, and then of course we bring on the very notable people like Billy Gibbons and so on, and they would just stay on from that point on.
Right. Yeah. The the opportunity to get together with all those folks and play that music is amazing because it seems like the downside to aging is we're losing these great musicians, Peter and Jeff, and so it's wonderful to be able to celebrate their music.
Yeah, well, he certainly deserved to be celebrated. Had he not gotten ill and had to go the direction physically and mentally that he did after Fleetwood Mac, he certainly would have been another Eric Clapton all through his career. He in reality was an Eric Clapton. Um, he he had all that talent come through him in his early 20s. I mean, it was just a brief few years. But if you look at the body of work over 3 years, I mean, it's so many greats, like even Jimi Hendrix, you know, I mean, I saw him with Little Richard actually in '65 and
Wow.
didn't know he was a left-handed guitar player.
Right.
Done in a few years and it was over then, you know, just sad, but that happens, you know. Luckily, we have a preservation of that music to live on.
Yeah. And on the other end of the spectrum, you got to work with Roy Orbison. That must have been.
Roy was probably takes the award as the sweetest guy that you ever work with, you know, that you'd ever meet, who was just, you know, of that ilk, that caliber, that classic nature. He was a sweetheart guy. And about 5 years ago, his family called me, and there was a company in England who was taking a lot of his tracks, just keeping the voice and redoing the backing and adding strings and all this fabulous, you know, arrangement. And they asked me to play on this one song because I did get to play on his hit record called Mystery Girl, and I
Yeah.
did a couple of tracks. Asked to perform on his video, the Black and White Night,
Yeah.
which was still a very popular concert video.
Yeah.
But I was in Fleet time. We had to tour, and we Billy and I couldn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that, like Bruce Springsteen and Elvis Costello.
Yeah, and here was James Burton, one of my early idols, playing my on a song that I recorded on the record. I always thought that was kind of ironic.
Yeah. And they talk about a legendary player. I mean, James's influence, his influence is so like Hank Marvin, his influence is so profound.
Uh, you know, I was just watching and thinking about there's two people that bring a lump in my throat, or maybe three. If I see certain old Roy Rogers things that he did, he was such an idol to me as a little boy. You know,
Yeah.
it's sort of nostalgic and emotional. And then I saw a clip of James with Rick Nelson uh, that I hadn't seen in years, and it had that same effect. It brought a lump to my throat. You know, they were so important to me and so many others, and they were so great.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a really cool vibe about him, the Paisley Telecat, and just the whole thing. In that era too, there just wasn't. It would be easy to put somebody like James Burton on the same level as like a cowboy hero of yours. You know what I mean?
Well, you're younger, but in early days of rock and roll, he was on every week. He was on TV every week on Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. So, you know, we didn't care so much about the show, but we wanted to see that song. And
Right.
there's James playing those cool bending the strings things, and Rick was really cool. He had a great voice, you know. I just look forward to that. That just, of course, I was called Ricky at the time, so I wanted to be a combination of Ricky Nelson and James Burton.
Yeah. It's interesting as we're sitting here talking. My wife's got an older brother named Rick. They grew up in Los Angeles, and if I sent you a photo of the two, it's like the two of you are like doppelgangers. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my god, no, not at all. So, um, yeah, one other thing I wanted to ask you about any tips for any aspiring slide players in terms of, you know, brass versus glass. It doesn't really matter. I know heavier, the more mass is preferable, higher action, thicker strings.
Well, that's what's worked for me, but I know there are other guys who, you know, they use a glass slide like a Dwayne Allman did, or you know, though their action won't be quite as high, and maybe they don't use quite as thick a string, so they can do what they need to do on that. This what I pointed out in my instructional slide guitar videos is there's really, when it comes to something like slide guitar, it's a no rules kind of thing. You do what feels best and sounds best to you, what you can make work. Um, man, I can't get a good sound unless I raise my strings up, and I think I get a better sound when I use a heavy slide and thick strings, and just get the action that way.
Yeah.
But there's other guys, so I would just say, start. Don't try to do too much too soon. That's very much a style of guitar that takes years, in my opinion, to
Yeah.
perfect. So, try to get those individual notes to ring out and then progress down the strings, play the same melody on each string and try to mute all the others. So you're just getting that one string ringing out and
Yeah.
then practice chords
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about slide and slide solos and parts and things that in my top 10 favorite solos, three of them at least, maybe more, are slide solos. Of course, Like a Rock, Running on Empty, and a track that George Harrison did later called Cheer Down.
Yeah, I
Off,
love
and I love the idea of playing in standard tuning as opposed to playing open A or open E, open G. I like and also for lap steel, it made more sense of playing. Uh, I keep the lower strings tuned E, B, E, so I can have like power chord type thing for the Pink Floyd stuff, but I keep the G, B, E on the top. It's kind of like an open E minor.
chords. You made that work for you. Uh, in the early days, I could play in a tuning like an E tuning or G or A, whatever, and I like to go back and forth. But like say for Like a Rock, that was standard tuning with the whole guitar just tuned up a half step, and that's what worked for me for years and years.
Yeah. 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 As long as it's, in the end, if it's moving people, however you get there, or if it's inspiring you, that's it.
That's
Yeah. Well, you're incredible conversationalist. Thank you so much for your time. You've been really gracious, and I've loved every minute of our chat.
Oh, well, listen, you made me feel real good with your comments here and there along the way, and you don't always get that feedback, so I appreciate that very much, and I'm very happy to be able to tell you what I'm doing now, and it's a nice platform, and so I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the inspiration and the music for all these years. It's your legendary status.
Thank you. I'm blessed that was able to survive in this crazy business for as long as I
Right.
have.
Yeah. Well, you have a great week, my friend. Thank you.
Nice talking.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Hang Podcast, interviews with noteworthy guitar players from around the world. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications to stay updated on our latest episodes.